Hey medicos, today we are starting respiratory system in physiology. The first chapter being overview of respiratory system. Firstly, what is respiration? Respiration is nothing but the act of taking in oxygen from the atmosphere and giving out carbon dioxide to the atmosphere from the lungs. The point to remember is fetal lungs are non-functional. So, during intrauterine life, the gaseous exchange takes place between fetal blood and the mother's blood through placenta. The number of times the newborn respires is 60 times per minute. During early childhood, it is 20 to 40 minutes, and during late childhood, it will be 15 to 25 minutes. Coming to the adult, it will be 12 to 16 times per minute. So there are two types of respiration. Firstly, it is external and internal. External is the respiration that is mainly taking place between the lungs and the blood. And internal is between blood and tissues. The phases in respiration are inspiration and expiration. And as we know, inspiration is nothing but taking in the air into the lungs from the atmosphere, and expiration is giving out the air from the lungs to the atmosphere. Coming to the functional anatomy, lungs have two layers, that is lungs is being enclosed by pleura, which is bilayered, and it is a serous membrane. The pleura, there are two layers of pleura, as we told, bilayered. The first layer being called the parietal layer. It is attached to the thoracic cavity. The visceral pleura is continuous with the lung surface. Parietal and visceral pleura are continuous at hilum. Intrapleural space is between parietal and visceral layers. It encloses intrapleural fluid. What is intrapleural fluid? It is a thin film of serous fluid. It is being secreted by the visceral layer, that is visceral pleura. Its functions are, it helps in lubrication, that is avoids the friction between the two layers, and it has negative pressure, that is it helps in maintaining the negative pressure, which we call it as intrapleural pressure. In abnormal conditions, this part, that is the intrapleural space, is filled with air. When it is filled with air, we call it as pneumothorax. With water, it is hydrothorax, blood, hemothorax, and pus, pyothorax. Next, tracheobronchial tree. Trachea is going to divide into primary bronchus, that is into left and right bronchus, which divides further into secondary bronchus. This is taking place in lungs. Then it divides into tertiary bronchi. These tertiary bronchi are 10 to the right and 8 to the left. Then this tertiary bronchus is going to divide into bronchioles. Bronchioles into terminal bronchiole. The terminal bronchiole is about diameter of 1 millimeter or even less than that. Then this divides into respiratory bronchioles, which is about 0.5 millimeters. Next, the respiratory tract can be divided into upper and lower. Coming to the upper respiratory tract, it is from the nose to the vocal cords. What are vocal cords? These are the fold of mucous membrane with larynx that vibrates to produce the sound. The lower respiratory tract includes trachea, bronchi, and lungs. Coming to the respiratory units. Respiratory units is the terminal portion of the respiratory tract. It is present in the parenchyma of lungs. The definition of respiratory units is that it is the structural and functional unit of the lungs. And this is the place where exchange of gases takes place. Structure of respiratory unit is it has respiratory bronchioles, which is going to divide into alveolar duct. This alveolar duct opens into alveolar sac. alveolar sac have alveoli. The place inside the alveolar sac is called as antrum. Alveoli has the diameter about 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters. Next, alveolar cells are also being called as pneumocytes because pneumo means lungs. Okay, so alveolar cells, there are two types of them, type 1 and type 2. Coming to type 1 cells, these are basically squamous epithelial cells. They form 95%, and these are the cells where gases are being exchanged between blood and alveolus. Coming to type 2, these are cuboidal and obviously make up 5%. These have granules, so they are called as granular pneumocytes, and these secrete alveolar fluid and surfactant. Coming to the respiratory membrane, it is membranous structure through which gaseous exchange is taking place. It separates the air in the alveoli and capillary blood. It is being formed by the alveolar membrane and the capillary membrane. Its surface area being about 70 meters squares and thickness is about 0.5 microns. There are certain functions of lungs except respiration. Though respiration is the first and the important function, the other functions are olfaction. Olfaction is nothing but we are able to smell certain things, and the receptors are present in the mucous membrane of nostril. Second one is the vocalization. Vocalization is that we are able to speak. This is attributed to the larynx. Next, prevention of entry of dust particles. This is being possible firstly by hair in the nasal mucous membrane. If this fails, then it will be taken care by mucus in the nasal mucous membrane. If even that fails, then there will be phagocytic action of macrophages in the alveoli. If all the three fails, then we have cough and sneeze reflex. We will be studying cough and sneeze reflex in a short time. Next function is defense mechanism. Defense mechanism, lungs have its own defense mechanism because cells of the lungs are going to secrete deficins and catalycidins. These are antimicrobial peptides. This is attributed to its lungs' own defense. The next being leukocytes. There are two types of cells mainly. The third one we'll be studying later. So, leukocytes, the first one is neutrophils. Neutrophils are phagocytic in nature. They are going to kill bacteria. Lymphocytes are going to provide immunity against bacteria. So, this becomes the second one under defense mechanism. The third one is macrophages. These are going to engulf the dust particles, so we'll call them as scavengers. They are also going to provide immunity by functioning as antigen presenting cells. Whenever antigen is going to enter the body, they are killed by antigen presenting cells like macrophages, and then antigen is digested to polypeptides, and then these polypeptides are being presented to T and B lymphocytes by macrophages. Also, macrophages secrete interleukins and tumor necrosis factor. This in general activates the general immune system of the body. They also secrete chemokines. Chemokines attract WBC to the site of inflammation. Next, mast cells. These resemble basophils. They are involved in hypersensitive reaction, example allergy. So if it's allergy, we know it should secrete heparin, histamine and serotonin. Next, natural killer cells. These are called as third type of lymphocytes. The first one is, we read it over here, neutrophils and lymphocytes. So, we are calling natural killer cells as lymphocytes. third type of lymphocytes. You know the first two types, T and B. Natural killer cells have granules. These granules are going to secrete hydrolytic enzymes which are going to destroy microorganisms. These are called as are involved in first line of defense against virus. Why do we attribute the tag first line of defense to natural killer cells? It is because natural killer cells destroy viral infected cells and also viruses or tumor forming cells. So hence they obviously prevent cancers. They secrete interferons and tumor necrosis factor. Tumor necrosis factor is also being synthesized by macrophages. Next, defense by dendritic cells. They are nothing but antigen presenting cells. We read that antigen presenting cells are going to kill the antigen, convert it to polypeptides and then present it to T and B lymphocytes. So, next, the fifth function of the lungs, which is non-respiratory, is maintenance of H2 balance. H2O, I mean water balance. How do we maintain water balance? It is because during expiration, we evaporate water vapors actually. So, if we hyperventilate, more water will be lost, and if we hypoventilate, then less water will be lost. The same way, regulation of body temperature. During expiration, there is also heat loss. So, the same mechanism holds true even here. Next, regulation of acid-base balance. This is an important concept. In blood, basically CO2 is being produced by the tissues of the body. During metabolism, this CO2 enters the blood from tissues. CO2 plus H2O is converted to H2CO3. This breaks down to H plus HCO3 minus, that is bicarbonate. In the lungs, the reaction reverses. H plus HCO3 minus gives you H2CO3, that is carbonic acid, which is converted to carbon dioxide and water. This carbon dioxide is thrown out of the lungs because it is volatile gas. So, how is it helping in acid-base balance? It is because whenever metabolic activities increases in the body, more CO2 is produced, more H plus, because here is the reaction. This is going to result in decrease of the pH of the body. To maintain back the pH, that is to bring back to normal, there will be increased pulmonary ventilation. With increased pulmonary ventilation, more CO2 is excreted out of the body, so we bring back pH to the normal. The changes of the pH or H plus concentration in the body is being identified by chemoreceptors in aortic, carotid bodies and medulla of brain. The eighth function is anticoagulant function. This is because in lungs we are producing heparin. So this prevents intravascular clotting. Next, the ninth function is the secretion of angiotensin converting enzyme. This is going to convert angiotensin 1 to active form of the same angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is helping us in regulation of extracellular fluid and blood pressure. And then angiotensin converting enzyme is produced by the endothelial cells of the pulmonary capillaries. The 10th function being synthesis of hormonal substances like prostaglandins, acetylcholine and serotonin. There are certain reflexes taking place in our respiratory system. The first one we study is the cough reflex. Cough is nothing but modified respiratory process which is characterized by deep inspiration and followed by a forceful expiration. It is a protective reflex and it is being caused due to the irritation in the respiratory tract and external auditory canal. So the causes being irritant agents and also in certain disorders like cardiac, pulmonary and tumor in thorax. The mechanism is, firstly you inhale deeply, then there is a forced expiration where the glottis is closed. Here there is an increase in intrapleural pressure for around 100 mmHg. The velocity being 960 km per hour. Here with this thing we are able to throw out the irritant out of the respiratory tract. The pathway is, firstly, where are the receptors? Many places. Nose, paranasal sinuses, larynx, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, pleura, diaphragm, pericardium, stomach, external auditory canal and tympanic membrane. How is the pathway? Let's study. It's very easy. Firstly, there should be afferent, then it goes to the brain and then you will have efferents which are going to act back on our respiratory tract. Afferent is being carried by vagus, trigeminal, glossopharyngeal and phrenic nerves. Cuff reflex is present in medulla oblongata. Efferents are vagus, phrenic and spinal nerves. These nerve fibers, that is from efferent nerve fibers, are going to activate the primary and accessory respiratory muscles in our body, and thus we have cuff reflex. The next one being sneezing. Sneezing is due to the irritation in nasal mucous membrane. If you want to define it, it's nothing but pretty same as cuff reflex. It is modified respiratory process characterized by forced expiration, and it is also a protective reflex. Yeah. So, the causes of sneezing are, that is obviously it is because of irritation. What is going to cause irritation of the nasal mucous membrane? It is due to the dust particles, debris, mechanical obstruction of airway or excessive fluid accumulation. This example you have cold. The mechanism is, again here you'll have deep inspiration like cuff reflex, again forced expiration. But the important point is, here we have opened glottis, while there we had closed glottis. Irritant is expelled out. The pathway is again afferent. It is by trigeminal and olfactory nerves. Next it goes to the brain from the afferent. It is to the sneezing center. This sneezing center is present in medulla oblongata. It is dispersed into nucleus of trigeminal, nucleus of solitarius and reticular formation of medulla. After here, it goes to the efferents. Efferent nerves are trigeminal, facial, glossopharyngeal, vagus and then the intercostal nerves. These efferents are going to activate pharyngeal, tracheal and respiratory muscles, and thus you have sneezing reflex. The last one being swallowing reflex or deglutition reflex. This prevents the movement of food particles into the respiratory tract. So, while you are taking in the food or during this act of swallowing, there is temporary arrest of the respiration. Usually, temporary arrest of respiration is called as apnea. But when this apnea is because of swallowing, we call it as swallowing apnea or deglutition apnea, because deglutition is nothing but swallowing. This swallowing apnea is seen during the pharyngeal stage, which is the second stage of ingestion. Thank you.